Bok muzičari i dobrodošli nam nazad na još jednu dozu priča o muzičkom biznisu. U ovom videu pričamo o muzičarima i izvođačima koji su napravili velike stvari, a da možda za njih nikad niste ni čuli i zaradili jako puno novaca koristeći sve strategije i alate o kojima pričamo.
$100 billion.
Do sad ste sigurno više puta čuli za ljude koji su uspjeli preko noći. I vjerojatno ste čuli pa to ništa ne dolazi preko noći, to mora postojati nekako vrijeme, samo mi za to ne znamo dok čovjek ne postane dovoljno poznat da ja za njega znam. A šta je sa svim onim ljudima koji su za njega čuli prije nego šta je postao poznat? Nisu se ni oni stvorili sami od sebe. Dakle, pojam uspjeha preko noći je apsolutno doviđenja, o tome više nećemo raspravljati, jer uspjesi preko noći često završavaju kao one hit wonderi, a o njima nećemo raspravljati jer iako ih možda slušamo već godinama i takvih bendova i izvođača ima puno, to nisu ljudi koji su ostvarili održivi muzički biznis. A isto tako znamo i jako puno primjera jako poznatih muzičara koji zapravo žive na dosta ograničenom mjesečnom budžetu jer ne zarađuju toliko koliko bi mogli, a sa druge strane imamo hrpe nezavisnih i manjih muzičara za koje nikad niste čuli, koji jako dobro žive, koji od svoje muzike, od svojeg muzičkog biznisa žive i ove priče su jedne od takvih. Ja se nadam da će vam ovi primjeri služiti kao inspiracija, kao jedan pozitivni poticaj, da se i sami primite svog muzičkog biznisa još jače, još bolje i da u jednom trenu možemo ovako pričati o vašim uspjesima. I by the way, ako već jeste ostvarili nekakav uspjeh koji je vrijedan spomena na ovaj način koji ćemo sad prezentirati ove bendove, onda mi se slobodno javite jer bi jako volio čut priču, jako bi volio pričati s vama, a možda i snimiti jedan razgovor koji možemo objaviti na našem kanalu da ga i drugi čuju. Toliko za uvod, idemo na razgovor. You also have your agency side of the business, which is called IndieX, in which you work with famous musicians and artists and acts, and not so famous musicians, artists, and acts who are also successful, and maybe some of our viewers will never hear about them, but they're making a very, very comfortable living by implementing the strategies you implement with them, working with them. So I would like to hear what is your favorite success story in the last few years, if you can talk about it, or you don't have to mention names, but something that could prove to anyone thinking about, I hear what they're saying here, but I'm not so sure that works in real life, you know?
Yeah. Well,
so what's working now?
One of my favorite agency success stories, I'll name two, because normally we work, especially today more than in the past, we work with artists who kind of already have a large fan base. And it's very easy for us to come in and say, here's where you're really not doing well from a marketing and sales perspective. Let's just fix that and we'll just print you money. Like that's kind of, it becomes a lot easier. And the music industry is like this. It's littered with artists who have huge fan bases that if any online business had that many fans and followers, they would be making boatloads of money off of direct sales. But artists aren't conditioned to think of themselves as directly selling. And so they just don't scoop up that potential. So we work primarily with those kinds of artists, but we have had a few where it was less easy or we had to do some building over time. And one such case is a Christian artist who was following our strategies, was in our community, came on board the agency because he just had a lot of disposable income. He had a really good job. And we worked with him we still work with him. He started in 2017. He's still with our agency today. He ended up quitting that high-paying job and going full-time music. But it was just about building infrastructure, making offers, and continuing to run his marketing with continued regular sales promotions. And so he replaced, a multiple $100,000 income fully with music, and continues to work with us to this day. And you've never heard of him guaranteed. And is just quietly churning out like a pretty successful income for one guy. And so that's, it's one of my favorite stories because he just gets all this stuff. He really is motivated and he's not cynical about the marketing. And at the same time, he's not like a bad musician, and he's not like he's exploitative. He loves his fans. But he just takes an uncynical approach to it. And he really is like a great case study. And one of my favorite stories from within that is that one time a fan of his, like, we had this offer. It's a smart idea in marketing to have a really high tier offer, because if you serve 1,000 customers, one of them, like, there's the 80-20 principle, where if you serve 1,000 customers, 200 of those customers will be responsible for 80% of the sales volume. So, there's and it's true in the music industry. 1% of artists is responsible for 90% of the income, right? And then if you take that 20%, those 200 people, within that, there's an 80-20. 40 of those people will be responsible for 80% of that 80%. And then out of that 40, you got 8 people who are responsible for the lion's share of that revenue. And so it's always smart to have a really high tier offer, because if 8 people are going to be responsible for something like 60% of your business's revenue, it's because they're buying much higher tier things. So we had an offer in his membership called the unicorn level of the membership, where I think it was like $1,000 a month or $10K for the year.
Wow.
And someone came along and bought the annual. They bought a year of unicorns, paid him $10,000, which is really cool. It's like he's not a famous person, but it just shows this stuff in action. It shows that principle I just went over as being very valid and true. And it's why Starbucks has like a $4,000 espresso machine they sell at their store, because the average person buys a $2 cup of coffee or a $4 cup of coffee. But that does mean that, a store gets 10,000 people in a month. So if the average person buys a $4 cup of coffee, then there is probably 1 or 2 people who will buy a $4,000 item. And so that's why they have it, because they know that. And so that's one of my favorite stories. There's another pretty famous actor and country artist who came on board NDX in 2017 or 2018. And we were just doing infrastructure building for the first 2 to 3 years. So the first year, I think he was slightly maybe break even on paying us, and then all the sales and then the costs. So he wasn't losing money, but he wasn't really making money working with us, but he believed in us. He saw what we were building for him. The second year he turned a profit. The third year he released a straight to DVD movie. And because we had built out all of this marketing infrastructure, we were able to then put that on offer, and we generated $1 million in sales for that DVD in like 9 months. The next year, we made another $1 million. This year, we're going to make another $1 million for him. So it just goes to show you that, like, slow to start off. We had to do a lot of infrastructure building, but once it was in place, it became trivial to just print money for this gentleman, because, we don't have to go build a bunch of email marketing and build a bunch of websites and build all this other stuff. It's already built. We just need a cool offer, and we're good to go.
So it's $1 million without the pinky at the side of the mouth.
Without what?
Without the pinky at the side of the mouth, like Dr.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
A real $1 million.
Exactly. Yeah.
Prekidam ovaj video samo na čas dok još imam tvoju pažnju da ti kažem kako bi ti Emuzičar mogao pomoći direktno. Ako već imaš zdravu bazu fanova koji te vole i prate, ali nisi točno siguran kako to monetizirati, mimo ovih nesigurnih načina kao što su streaming, kao što su skupljanje prava ili organiziranje svirki na koje ne znaš koliko će ti ljudi doći, onda si vjerojatno dobar kandidat za naše Emuzičar 1-na-1 mentorstvo, i to je ono što mi radimo najbolje. Strategije koje koristimo pomogli su već stotinama muzičara, i malih i srednjih, ali i velikih, koje vjerojatno vidiš i na Billboard ljestvicama, i uz malo truda i uz pravi fokus i uz naše vodstvo ti se možeš priključiti tom klubu. Na emuzičar.com klikneš na usluge, pa na 1-na-1 mentorstvo i ispuniš upitnik za prijavu. Ako si prikladan kandidat i imamo slobodnih mjesta, javljamo ti se s prijedlogom za sastanak da vidimo kako ti najbolje možemo pomoći da ostvariš svoje ciljeve. Pročitaj sve što piše na stranici, da znamo o čemu pričamo i da znaš što je sve potrebno da bi mogli skupa raditi. ako kroz analizu tvojih odgovora možda skužimo da nisi u fazi u kojoj ti možemo pomoći najbolje što bi mogli i najbolje što bi htjeli, preporučam ti da svejedno ispuniš našu besplatnu Emuzičar procjenu u kojoj ćeš saznat u kojoj jesi fazi, koja ti je najveća prepreka i kako ju prebroditi i kako bi pokrenuo taj svoj proces da dođeš do te faze gdje onda možemo opet pričat kako ćemo lansirati tvoju karijeru u visine. Dosta sam smetao, natrag na video.
And then my favorite stories from within our community and outside of the agency is probably two people who ended up working with our team. One is Andy Hunter of the band As December Falls. Came into the community and his band was playing empty shows, like no one there. And I think maybe they just released a debut album or whatever, but like they had no fans really. And they really wanted to come up playing live shows, but there was just no way to get people in the seats. And so he came into the community, he learned advertising and the buddy system. And then using that, he sold out a 10-date run in like 100 cap venues. So that's about 1,000 tickets that he sold completely out because he had just learned these things. And it was like, you know, the year before, empty shows, tragic. Comes in, learns this stuff. The next year, you know, sold out shows. But then he had a promoter or a booking agent who booked these shows for him. But I told him like, well, you don't need a booking agent to book 100 cap venues. You just need to make some calls. And they were paying him 50% of their profit. That's kind of the agreement they had. So they fired him and they self-booked 16-date run of 200 cap venues, and they sold out almost all of those shows too. The next year they booked some 300 cap venues, sold it out. And the next year, COVID, they sold CDs online because they couldn't tour, and they generated tons. They generated like I think at that point they had like 11,000 customers.
Wow!
And then the next year they wanted to do festivals.
Wait, just a second, Circa. You said like 11,000 customers. So let's say some of them probably bought more than just one CD. But if all of them just bought one CD, that would be like sales figures for the 80s of people buying CDs. Or LPs, or in the 90s CDs.
Yeah.
That would chart on every chart you can imagine.
So, yeah, you mentioned that. The year after COVID, they wanted to get bigger venues, and so they went with a booking agent simply to get at, because like in the live show world, like Live Nation and Ticketmaster control everything, and you need access, you need a handshake. So they got a booking agent, but the booking agent they just showed him all of their sales results, all that they had done, and he was like, "I'm not going to mess with this. Do everything you want to do. You just need to use my platform, but I'll do anything that makes you successful." So they had a lot of leverage in that conversation, and he was willing to play ball. And so
and that goes back to what we were talking about before.
Yeah, exactly.
About leverage and talking to people when you have it.
Right. Is they approached someone because they needed something very specific that they knew he could provide, and they didn't have to do it. They just wanted to, and they knew exactly what they wanted. That's an example of like a good business decision, right?
Yeah, and then you pay for it because you know what you're getting and you know what that person is supposed to do for you.
Exactly, yeah. So they booked a huge run, pretty much sold it out, nearly sold it out. Most of the dates were sold out. And then they got on festivals with like Sum 41 and Green Day and Bowling for Soup and all these like huge acts. And they started getting like awareness in their industry of like, who the hell are these guys who sell and tour so well? And so point being is that they use digital marketing to pre-sell copies of their upcoming album for like almost a year. And they debuted at #1 on the UK rock charts as a result. And these are people who have no press, like they never did any publicity campaigns. They're not on any playlists. Their Spotify streams are abysmal compared to how much money they make. And they got the whole local rock industry scratching their heads as to how they do what they do. It's all because of digital.
Yeah, I think Andy said that they were like 1 or 2 places above like Billy Idol or someone.
Yeah, Billie Eilish, you mean?
I think it was Billy Idol actually, if it's a rock chart.
Oh, okay.
I think so.
They
Or
got-
maybe I heard wrong.
They almost ended up
even
on
more
the
if it
top.
was Billie Eilish.
They almost ended up at the top 10 albums of the week they released, but they got beat out by Taylor Swift.
She should have let him have it.
Yeah, right? What the hell?
Like, come on, guys.
But yeah, so that's one of my favorite
She's
stories.
Such a nice person, and everyone says.
Yeah. She seems to be a warm individual. But yeah, it's
While we're at the topic of Taylor Swift, what do you think of what she does and how she's doing it?
I think she's brilliant and really good. She used the traditional music industry machinery as a means to an end. She was the 0.001%, as it turns out. But once she got to a place of prominence, she left her label, she self-released music, she takes major business responsibility for her business. And as a result, she's the industry's at her feet. She's dominating.
And she learned how to maximize the monetization from the fans that are just waiting for her to do something and give them something to buy.
Yeah. She's someone we probably couldn't get as an agency client because there's probably not a whole lot of holes in what she's doing.
Mm-hmm.
For sure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. We couldn't make a compelling
Awesome.
case that like, oh, you're not doing this. The one thing we could say is like, well, your email marketing is trash. Like we could just fix your email.
I just wanted to say
Yeah.
probably straight.
Yeah. But other than that, like she's got it on lock.
Hvala ti što gledaš naše videe do kraja. To nam jako pomaže da nas YouTube shvati ozbiljno, a i ozbiljno će nas shvatiti ako lajkaš, komentiraš, šeraš to friendu, sve ove standardne YouTube fore. Znamo da smo dosadni, ali to tak ide, moramo te podsjetiti tu i tamo.